on the short-term EMS in Webster. And Dan was here 3 months ago, I think on June 27th, and gave us the first 3 months since Penfield Volunteer Ambulance has been covering the full 35 square miles of Webster. And now we're getting the next 3 months update on various call statistics and whatever. So Dan, I'm going to hand the baton to you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you for the opportunity to talk again tonight. Has been a very, very busy last 3 months since I last spoke to you. Objective, subjective, ethos, and pathos. Long story short, we're doing very well, covering 2 towns, 70 square miles, about 75,000 residents between Penfield and Webster. But just in this community alone, over the last 3 months since I last spoke, 1,411 calls. We've covered 96.5% of those, mutual aided 51. When I say mutual aided, means it's impossible to cover every call. Nobody can carry a business model of enough ambulances and enough staff to cover 5th, 6th, or 7th calls, or I should say 6th, 7th, and 8th calls, because we staff 5 during the day. But I'm quite proud. You know, the regional matrix or the Department of Health matrix is to cover, you know, above 90%, or regional to cover above 95%. We continue to do so. You know, being handed a second town on such short-term notice. Probably our busiest 3 months in our course history. Did 1,000 calls in July and 1,000 calls in August, and just went over 1,000 calls in September before we hit the October threshold. And I must say, quite proud of our staff. You know, again, objective, subjective, ethos, pathos. You know, we've had 3 calls alone in just the 30 days where we went to a call that was a cardiac arrest, meaning the patient was not conscious or not breathing. 2 of those 3 right in this community, and 2 patients walked out of the hospital with all neuros intact. One of those was actually a 2-year-old. You know, a lot of other calls you probably have seen in the news, but our crews continue to do a great job, and my thanks to them for the hard work that they've done. You can see East Webster is a bit busier than West Webster, being the contractual provider for the town of Webster. EMS services, that includes the East Webster numbers. We're already a certificate of need holder for West Webster based on when the fire district transferred their CON to us in 2021. So that's why those numbers are separate. But under our contract with this town board, it's those calls in East Webster, 790 in the last 90 days. Next slide, Bridget. Besides calls, community engagement is imperative. We've been involved with a lot of things. In fact, we were just involved with, at Kent Park, Special Olympics just a few weeks ago. I forgot to list that up there. We did an amateur PGA event at Webster Golf Course. Webster Carnival is obviously a huge event, also a very busy event. Some of those nights were really well attended. The Veterans Music Fest. Barry's did an Irish Fest at the Carnival grounds. West Webster Fire Department does a lot for the fallen firefighter tribute. They did their bike rodeo through this town. Webster Rocks, which is for ALS awareness. We got the marching band event coming up, and we continue to do radiological planning and training with Monroe County and Gannett, just to bring our folks up to speed, because so many portions of East Webster are part of that evacuation zone. So quite busy, besides taking calls. Just the commercial that is out there, Penfield Ambulance does have a loan covered at 1585 Jackson Road that's open to our residents. Well, that also includes our residents of Webster now. So if anybody does need walkers, canes, or crutches, or their orthopedics office says, hey, go get this at these places, you are more than welcome in this community to do that. Same thing with the free CPR training. You can find all of that on our website at penfieldambulance.org. That's pretty much all I have. Thank you for your continued support. Any questions?
Sure.
I don't have any questions, but sounds like it's going great. Have not heard anything negative about the services that are being provided, so that's good news.
Good.
Well,
No news.
thank you very much,
No
Dan.
news is
Doing-
good news.
Your team's doing a
Appreciate-
great job down there.
Thanks,
And I like to see the community engagement also. You show 130 man-hours at the carnival alone. So thank you for, your service to our community.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that was one thing, honestly, as we had to ramp up and prepare for this in January, this community, a little bit different than Penfield, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of engagement. I wasn't really anticipating all this just this summer alone, but we kind of had to ramp up for it a little bit last minute. I like to be proactive. We were a little reactive on how much community engagement that happens up here. A little bit of a surprise to us, but we're getting through it, and we actually like those events. It's a lot better than sometimes handling a 911 call, which are not people's best days.
How long was the list for volunteers for Barry's Irish Festival? Do you have a long list of volunteers who wanted to attend that?
We had a couple people interested. A lot of our volunteer members attended. We did end up putting 2 employees on, and did have an ambulance there for the 6. I did ask a lot of people, but there was their preference to attend, sir, so, versus work, and I understand.
Yeah, it was a great festival. I was there early on, and
Yeah.
it was very well attended.
Yeah, 8,000 plus, I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your service. I'm out there a lot, and I saw your, cars go by and everything, and a lot of people saying good things.
Thank you, Jenny.
About what you do, so,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Yeah, and your support is vital, but West Webster Fire Districts and Northeast Joint Fire Districts, housing us strategically on Gravel Road and Phillips Road has been enormous and pivotal for us to be able to cover response areas and meet
Yep.
response times matrix, which is important. We don't always, but 90 to 95% of the time, we're on scene within 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for giving them that recognition. It is very,
Yeah,
You know,
they're
very
great
nice
to
of
us.
them to allow your team to stage there.
Yeah,
And not in the ambulances, like actually in the buildings.
right, we're lucky.
Yes.
We're lucky.
It's interesting, Dan, because, EMS, ambulance, today alone, unsolicited, I had 2 people ask me, what's going on with ambulance in Webster? One was at a board meeting I was at this morning for the Webster Economic Development Alliance, and I was able to give some high points, but also said, you really want to hear it, watch or come to the 7 o'clock meeting tonight. But I had what was great was that one of our advisors for the Webster Economic Development Alliance is Greg Chambry, who owns Maplewood Nursing Home. And I said, Greg, how has the experience been the last 6 months since Penfield Volunteer Ambulance has been covering? And he was like, it's been fantastic. That was at 7 o'clock, 7:30 this morning. Bridget Harvey, our Director of Communications, will tell you that I was at a speaking engagement at CDS Monarch, if that's what you want to call it. It was a Q&A. And one of the citizens from CDS Monarch asked Bridget, what's going on with ambulance in Webster? And I was confidently able to say, well, kind of the same thing. Watch it tonight on YouTube or come to the meeting. But tangibly, the statistics show in the last 6 months that Penfield Volunteer Ambulance has done a wonderful job for us. And can't say enough about that. And I also told them, come and watch this because I'll warm the seat for you, Russ, because you're about to give the long-term thing, long-term update. But I will say this, just in case, I think you use some acronyms and whatever that maybe people watching at home live or watching later, or even attendees here today, might not quite understand. One of the things that was great about Penfield jumping in late March of this year for a short-term contract through the end of this year, through the end of '24, was that they had the ability with their relationships with the Northeast Joint Fire Department and also the West Webster Fire Department to stage their ambulances at the bays that they had on Phillips Road for Northeast Joint, right across from the rec center, but also at the Gravel Road Fire Department that West Webster built several years ago, which was built to house ambulances. And I think the importance of that is that anybody that understands the ambulance business, if I'll call it that, Russ, is that seconds matter. These are traveling hospitals in some of these cases now. And if you get a call from DeWitt Road, which is West Webster, and you're coming from Jackson Road, where your base is, I don't care how fast you're going, your lights are on, and your ambulance is, it's gonna take you longer to get there than if you're staged at Gravel Road. That's just common sense. And the reality is that people that live on Salt Road, if they have a major problem, it's nice to have you guys staged at the Phillips Road station. And not for nothing, your main base on Jackson Road probably is 1 mile from the border of Penfield and Webster over there.
About 1.2.
Right. I've been very happy with the fact that that triangulation of the 35 square miles of Webster has resulted in being able to have those calls be handled by the closest ambulance. Now, the last thing I'll say, but you gave me some time because we got until 7:30, and I know Russ won't take that long. Mutual aid is something that I think that we, you talk about it, this and that, this 97%. And I think the average person doesn't quite understand. I didn't understand it until I was educated on it, is that you cannot cover 100% of your calls in your town. Because if you're staffing your ambulances 24/7, which is a 24/7 business, and if you have 5 ambulances up during the day that has 10 staff probably, 1 EMT, 1 paramedic, unfortunately, 911 calls for ambulance don't come in on the hour. They come in when they come in. And a lot of times what happens is that 5 calls come in an hour, and all 5 of those ambulances are out. And then a minute later, the 6th call comes in. What do? Well, what all these EMS agencies have done, either codified or just by custom, is that you cover me, I'll cover you. That's mutual aid.
Correct.
So that when they can't cover it, because people ask me all the time, why was a Rondequoit ambulance at the call in Webster? Why was West Wayne, or whatever it's called, Ontario ambulance at the call? That's why. It's because we just had our 6th call within a certain amount of time, and we only have 5 ambulances up. You can't put up a number of ambulances and an infinite number of staff. Now, what Dan didn't report on, and I don't mean to, Penfield Volunteer Ambulance historically, in the areas that they cover, which was Penfield's 35 square miles, and now Webster's, so 70 square miles, you just told us what you have had to have other agencies come in to cover your calls in Webster. How much mutual aid did Penfield Ambulance do for other municipalities that needed your help in the last 3 to 6 months?
It's about 6%. It used to be higher, just because we had to share border with Webster, but now that we're covering it, our mutual aid boundaries typically include Perryton or Rondequoit, Village of East Rochester, Brighton, and a little bit in the city. And a little bit to Wayne County,
Right.
yeah.
So where theoretically, you'd like to think that all agencies of all factors are equal, they're all at 95% coverage, and you're getting 5% of the other agencies coming into town, and of all your calls, 5% of them, you're going outside of town.
Correct, yes.
Right. But in this case, you only needed 3% to come into town,
Correct.
and you guys
3.4.
were helping on 6% of your calls outside of town, which means you are helping more than your share, which is great,
Yeah.
so.
Thanks, Dan.
For
Dan, I
what
just-
it's worth, there you have it.
I just want to thank you and your wonderful organization for the willingness to jump in and help us when we really needed the assistance, and to integrate yourself into the community and show that you really are interested in Webster. You've done a tremendous job, and I want to thank you and all the people of the organization.
Yeah. I just want to close with the kudos. I just kind of GM this from a Brandon Bean perspective, is to my 30 full-time employees, my 35 part-time employees, and about 30 volunteers and 9 volunteer board of directors. They deserve, somebody just kind of to quarterback it and steer the ship, but we wouldn't be as successful without them. So the kudos goes to those folks that do this 30 to 40 calls a day on the road. So thank you, folks.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.
Hey, Russ, even with my diarrhea of the mouth, I'm still 1 minute ahead of time for your slot. So the next agenda item up tonight is an update from Russ Ziskin, who is actually the co-chair of a committee, along with Councilman John Cahill, who is the liaison from the town board to EMS ambulance in town. And Russ is going to give us an update on the long-term EMS in Webster, which we assume, knock on wood, to be January 1st, 2025 and beyond.
Yeah.
Russ, the baton is yours.
Yeah, so, you know, this is not a reflection certainly on Penfield. I mean, the town in doing its diligence is looking just to ensure that, you know, they're looking at a fair and balanced long-term solution. And I get that question a lot, by the way. Why don't you cover 100% of your calls? Get an accident on the thruway, takes 30 ambulances 10 years ago. So that means to cover 100% of your calls, you have to have 30 ambulances, right? That would put, you guys would be out of business in what, about 3 months? You know, so that's the easy answer. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
not possible. So on the long-term solution, you know, we've been at this podium a couple times, and I'll just recap. We decided to investigate the possibility of putting out an RFP for ambulance. And the first thing we did is just, before we took the time to, you know, which it is timely, or it does take a bunch of time to put together an RFP, a formal RFP, we said, let's gauge the interest with an RFI, you know, basically a request for interest. And we did that, that was done a couple months ago, and we got responses back only from 2 agencies who said, yeah, we'd be interested in providing a formal request or a formal response to an RFP, that being Penfield and Monroe. There were 5 ambulance corps out of the, I don't have it on here from my notes that I gave you, but there were 5 who formally declined to respond, and 14 who just didn't respond, so by default was a no. So we looked at the response to the RFI, said, hey, just to pre-qualify the respondents, we had a few extra questions and sent out a pre-RFP questionnaire. Both agencies responded and with reasonable answers. So now what we have is basically the RFP process. And the committee I'm working on with John, we're putting together a formal RFP that we'll send to the 2 agencies. The hope being in about 2 weeks with about a 30-day response turnaround, and then a decision in the 30 days following that. So that's really it in a nutshell. I'll be uncharacteristically short in my
Pithy, you're
in
pithy.
what I have to say tonight.
Pithy.
Thank you
And
very
those
much.
of you who know me, I hear the chuckles. It's all right. Any questions?
Thank you.
Looks like you guys are gonna get a 10-minute break.
No,
No,
thank-
you're
thank-
not gonna, but keep going. Do you have any questions or comments at the
I-
board level?
No, I just want to thank Russ for, again, his willingness to jump into this and be a part of the process. Other than the fact that you're a Webster resident, and you do have a lot of experience in the ambulance business, as well as other businesses, you don't have a horse in this race. And it's just been really very kind of you, if you will, to be a volunteer in this effort, so thank you.
And to that point, he has contributed
Hours.
hours upon
Yes.
hours
Yes.
upon hours and shown a great deal of leadership in these endeavors, given your background and your decades' experience in the ambulance business. So we are all extremely appreciative of all that you've done.
Well, like Dan says, I mean, you know, I'm not doing it by myself. I got a group of people helping
Right.
out, including John Cahill
Yeah.
himself, so.
So I'm not gonna go up to 7:30, but I do feel as if I should add a few things to this. It'll be interesting to see, by November 15th, around then, what Monroe and/or Penfield Volunteer Ambulance reply on this more robust RFP that this committee is drafting. One of the things that I'm hoping we will do sometime in late November, which I think the November 21st is a board meeting, and then there's 2 board meetings in December, I think the 5th and the 19th, is that we will also, John, Russ, and I have talked about the fact that we owe it to the community to at least report back on some due diligence we did on a long-term option that is the town government running an ambulance department. We are in a position where we can do that. And the reason why we're in a position that we can do that is that we have a municipal authority, a municipal certificate of need with the state of New York that was obtained back in the 2016 range. It was finalized in 2020. We're the only town in Monroe County that has it. Because we have that, we have the authority at this point to run a business, of an ambulance business. We have the authority, the legal authority to go and hire W-2 employed EMTs and paramedics, put them into the state pension system, have them have town benefits. We can go out and lease or buy an ambulance base. We can go out and lease or buy ambulances. And we can run, the government can run that business. We have the authority to do that. And I'm going to say that again, the government can run that business. Now,
Am I not supposed to say anything?
the government can run that business. Did I say that a third time? Okay.
Well,
By November 21st, we will present back what we found as far as some precedents of other municipalities have done it, how they've experienced, what they experienced up to this point, but also what we're seeing as indicators of this industry, which it's an industry. The ambulance is a business industry that is going under a lot of changes right now, an uncertain future. And we are going to be able to report back that if we want to look at that option long-term, how many millions of dollars would have to be invested up front in capital to do so. But we are going to report on that, Russ.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that would be November 21st board meeting or sometime in December. We owe it to the community to show that we, looked into that. And maybe that's the way we go. But the other thing will be what Russ just described, is that two agencies, Penfield Volunteer Ambulance and Monroe, have, we think that they'll respond to this RFP, and then we'll go from there.
so Russ, I've got a question for you. Dan, I've got a question for you also, if you could go up to the mic, just to give a point of fact on what we're going to be doing, the due diligence. Dan, how many ambulances do you have in Penfield right now that is roadworthy?
7, and next week we'll be at 8 when they put the hydraulic
Right.
lifting equipment on it.
So, Russ, this question is to you. Dan, you can opine in also. What is the cost to purchase and equip a new ambulance, including the power lift?
So interesting you ask, because I just yesterday signed a check, because I also run an ambulance company out in Onondaga County. It was $216,000 for the ambulance, empty.
Right.
The power lift stretchers that he may be talking about, all in, about $40,000. The Life Pack, now the standard is a Life Pack 35, retails at $58,000. So that's an ambulance and 2 pieces of equipment. I mean, somebody with a calculator can do the math real quick, but it is not cheap.
Right.
We have 8 ambulances, need to replace all of those Life Packs, and some of the other devices. We're at about $1 million right now to just to replace some 2 or 3 pieces of equipment in the 8 ambulances we have. So
Right.
they're expensive.
Yes, they are. Thank you.
Yeah, and we were lucky. We received an ARPA grant for the safe ambulance. The total grant is $350,000. It's from Monroe County. All purchases, to Russ's point, were about $361,000. And to Russ's point, we became an ALS agency in 2017. We had 5 or 6 Life Pack 15s. We just purchased and took delivery of 8 Life Pack 35s. It's a $400,000 ticket that we just paid. But for the betterment of our community and our patients, because we have to be up with the technology, to Tom's point, to the ever-changing demand
Right.
of healthcare.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the medical standards require it at this point. Like these Life Pack 35s, they can do things that we are required to do. And the previous models, which you would keep as long as you could, like in our situation out in Syracuse, the contracts are out and they are not renewable. If they break after the contract runs out at the end of this month, you can't even pay to have them fixed. Ours are working great, but they refuse to fix them. They said, that's it. See, luckily the stretchers, those $45,000 stretchers, the contract's another 2 years. But, yeah, it's big bucks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I would think to put our agency together right now would probably cost about $15 million.
Yeah.
We got 5 minutes until the regular board meeting starts, so I'll just leave you with this. I would be remiss if I didn't say that John and Russ's co-chairing of this committee is, I called it the dream team back at the, Paul, you've been on that committee from a finance, director of finance of the town, but some of the other people that you've gathered on that committee that have EMS and billing and operational, and it's really an impressive committee, and there is zero chance of patronage from a standpoint. They don't have a dog in the fight. They actually, as they were developing the 20 agencies that got the 21, I think, that got the, what was it called, a request for interest.
21, yeah.
If one of the people on the committee worked at one of those agencies, they were ineligible. We didn't want any semblance of patronage in this. It is a really talented group of people, and Russ, to John's point, you've put in hours and hours and hours of time, and, I can say it because it's not gonna be taxpayer money. I told you I'll take you out for a steak dinner and a nice bottle of red wine. That's on me.
That was 2 years ago, I think, wasn't it, Russ?
Yeah.
We're not done yet, Russ.
I think the cup of coffee I bought myself. But
Thanks, Russ. And that concludes tonight's workshop. So Mark, we'll cut it loose and then we'll come back with.